There are a lot of reasons to be proud of the United States of America. I find some of the most obvious reasons to manifest themselves as what brings people here from all around the world. You can spin a globe and point to places where there is no separation of church and state, where you cannot believe or disbelieve how you want or feel, where the punishment for nonconformity can be death or imprisonment. You can point to places where personal traits beyond your conscious control can get you into serious trouble, such as race, sexuality, or sex. You can point to places which are torn by violence among political groups, are controlled by warlords and drug cartels and terrorists. You can point to places where your job and ability to make a living are determined by the state of your social status and not by your work ethic or skill set. You can point to places where your voice as an individual has no meaning. You can point to places where the idea of private property is non-existent. Even in open-minded, well-developed countries such as the UK, Germany, and France, their constitutions make the declaration that the right to free speech is granted by the state and not by your existence as an individual. I look to our southern borders, to people who are fleeing from oppressive dictatorships and violently brutal conditions as determined by drug cartels, not to mention the corruption that infects the good that does exist in those places. I look to certain places in the Middle East, China, and Africa, where homosexuals are brutally murdered and where both atheism and practice of a different religion are punishable by law as well. I look to places where people have no means to defend themselves from violent tyranny. I look to places where the land itself has been destroyed by violence and corruption. I look to places where your life is controlled by society and state based on your gender, where women are seen as less than human. I look to places with very little checks and balances within their political system, which leads to an overabundance of power being handled by one party. For those who are champions of diversity, you must look and see that these places in the Middle East, Africa, Central and South America, even parts of Europe and many, many places in Asia, do not bear close to the diversity within the United States of America. There must be a reason why people leave those places and come here. Every inhabitant of this continent is an immigrant. This was, is, and always will be the New World, the land of opportunity and freedom, so long as we protect it as such. But my message is not simply about immigration. I also stand to say that as a human species, we need to see the First and Second Amendment of the Constitution of the United States of America less as rights and more of responsibilities. Namely, speaking the truth and avoiding the temptation to lie or sit quietly in the face of lies. And that we are to be held responsible by ourselves and by our communities and by businesses to manage firearms and other weapons safely and to organize ourselves to defend our liberties from whatever group should the need arise. Our military reaches all over the world, partially because many other developed nations refuse to get involved with threats to other peoples. By sitting back and not taking action, this often leads to the United States becoming perceived as an oppressor and an enforcer of Western ideology instead of a liberator from historically flawed ideology and oppressive governments. Critics of the United States that take the forms of foreign individuals, foreign governments, and even people within our own borders often fail to take size into perspective. At almost 333 million people, we are the third largest country by population. If we were to add 1 billion to that number, we would still just barely make it to the number 2 spot, just barely cresting over India and still being overtaken by China. Compare that to the UK with their 66.6 million on those small islands, or the 27.3 million in all of Scandinavia, or the 37.6 million covering the vast expanse of Canada. These places often serve as our critics when mentioning how we need to do better. But in response, I would say that we have many, many more individuals to take care of than they do. It is also important to mention our geographical size, which places us at the number 4 spot compared to the rest of the world. Much of that land has been preserved in the form of national and state parks. These beautiful natural places are preserved by the government, most, if not all of which, belong to the indigenous peoples long before Europeans ever showed up. We are by no means perfect. Our own country has faced challenges of religious persecution, suppressed speech, gender inequality, racism, slavery, civil war, economic devastation, and intolerance, all of which are problems we still face today. But if we use the scales and compare ourselves to our past, I'd say we're doing a lot better. And that is why I am proud to be a citizen of the United States of America. I thought really carefully about all the words that I put together this morning, and I just woke up and thought it would be a good thing to do. And I wish everybody, whether they be citizens of the United States or otherwise, a good, happy Independence Day and 4th of July. And I would say and ask that God bless America and that we try to do better and do our best. Out.